Okay, so today we're going to start with our software overview. So getting into Visum and just looking at how is it laid out, what kind of menus and graphics do we have in the software so that we can figure out how to maneuver around the model. So to start, we're going to look at the file structure of the model. So we have a download link that we're going to be passing out to everybody with all these files in them. And what you're going to see in this is you're going to see some folders and some other file types. But the first one I want to point out is the .ver or version file. This is going to be the base Visum input file that you're going to be bringing into the model. Now, the way we have it set up right now, we have a 2015 version file and 2045 version file. So there'll be two separate version files within your folder. The next type of file that I want to point out are some of these listings. So in the lists, there are different list layouts that show various attributes and values within those lists, comparative lists, things like that. And those are all saved as these list layout files. So we'll be referencing these a little bit more later on in the training when we're looking at pre-formatted list layouts. We also have some scripts that are used for various calculations within the procedure run. You don't really need to get into the scripts. If you're interested, you can. They're there. But as far as model use goes, those are all embedded within the procedure sequence. So when you hit play on the procedure, it'll automatically run through these, but you can take a look at them there in the scripts menu. We also have the graphic parameter settings. These do not affect the output of your file. They just show different graphic overlays on your file. So if you want to see link bars or intersection analysis tools or zone analysis tools, you can preset those and save them as a graphic parameters file. So we have a bunch of these for different purposes, including some training ones that we're going to be using in tomorrow's session. We also have a folder for filters. Filters are used to activate and deactivate certain objects with different attributes on them so that you can enact mass edits or attribute changes to certain classes of objects using these different filters. And then we have some other data exchange formats that you might see, like .NET files or transfer files or demand structure files that'll just be sprinkled throughout, text files, things like that. Sometimes we also have third-party files such as shape files, OpenStreetMaps, GTFS. These are all used to help build and prepare either existing infrastructure or new infrastructure. You can bring these files into, so you don't have to manually draw out links or builds and things like that. All right, so getting into the Visum interface overview, the first thing we're going to do is when we open one of the networks, in this case, it'll be the 2015 base version, for example. What you're going to see is you're going to see a few different windows. It may be laid out like this, or they might be stacked up, just depending on how you prefer to have your software open. But where we're going to start is by opening the software. You can just right-click on that version file and say open with Visum if you have Visum installed, or you can just drag and drop it onto Visum. And the first place I want to point you to is this top bar here. This is our menu bar. You're going to see a lot of different menus in this listing. We also have various quick access toolbars such as save, open, different layout files, things like that that you can go through in this menu. And then we have the different panels that we're going to go through that have various objects and layouts. So starting with the menus, we have the file menu. Now this menu is where you can go through and open and save various different layouts or version files. You can import and you can export from this menu. This is where you can open the files. So from Visum, you can open the version files. You can also use that open file option to open different layouts or filter files or network files that have different presets for for layouts that you like or filters that you like, so you don't have to go back and reprogram them every time you open the software. Similarly, we have the save section. So again, this is where you can, if you have a filter that you just invented and you want to save it as a filter file, you can go to that save file as option and save it there. We also have transfer networks and scenario management. So today we're going to be talking about how to compare and transfer different version files, but we also have a version of the D7 model in the TBRPM model in scenario management with the scenario management structure. We'll talk about that a little bit more detail in a couple minutes, but this is where you'd access that scenario management structure. And then you can also import data from various sources as well. Again, going back to shapefiles. So say, for example, you have like a public transit line that you want to import. You can import that as a shapefile if you have it, or GTFS or OpenStreetMaps and those kind of imports. As well as exporting data in a similar way. If you have certain elements that you want to export as a shapefile or something like that, you can definitely do that as well. And then you can set project directories. This is important. When you download the file, you'll want to make sure that all of your project directories are pointing to the right place. It's a quick and easy process. You just open up this project directories and you can locally save it to your local directory, and this will make sure that the scripts are looking at the correct location and things like that. The next menu over that we're going to talk about is the edit menu. And the really big thing here that I want to point out is the user preferences. This is where you can define your hardware and interface preferences. What kind of graphics are you using, things like that. And then in the view menu, this is where you can open up all of the different panels that we see, whether it's your network editor, your 3D visualization, various toolbars, things like that. If you accidentally close or lose a toolbar, you can always come back into the view menu and open it back up. In the list menu, this is where you can access all of the tables in Visum, or most of the tables at least in Visum, the various objects within our network. They're all contained within lists so that you can have access to the whole layout. Now, a list is going to be kind of like an Excel spreadsheet with some extra capabilities, but you're going to have, you know, your links and your nodes, your physical objects, as well as some of your supply and your background objects are going to contain all of the objects and attributes within that object type. So if you open up one of the lists, for example, if we go into network and then zones, you can see all the zones in your network and you can see various attributes about them, right? What kind of, housing units do they have? What kind of populations do they have? Things like that, as well as inputs. Besides inputs, you can also see outputs as well. So you can gather both input and output data from these list menus. The next menu is the calculate menu. This is where all of the underlying methodology is defined. You pick out what kind of volume delay functions you have and what kind of procedure settings do you want to have. Do you want to save your paths, or do you just need the output volumes, things like that. So here's where you can go define what kind of calculations are being executed within Visum. The big one here is going to be our procedure sequence. So this has been pre-set up in all these models as part of the model conversion process. And so in this procedure sequence, we have everything from trip generation, trip distribution, mode choice, network assignment, and then as well as network analysis, assignment analysis. So you can go through and run all of the procedure, or you can run just parts of it. So for example, if you're doing a zone update, you might want to go back through and rerun your trip generation and trip distribution. If you're just doing a network update, you can turn off all that trip gen and trip distribution. If you're just adding links or changing the geometry of some intersections or something like that, you can go through and just rerun the assignment and see if how the assignment changes because of it. So you don't have to run the whole procedure. And like Adam said before, the whole procedure takes about 90 minutes to run on a laptop. If you have a stronger computer, you can probably get that time down a little bit. But if you don't need to run the whole procedure, the assignment itself doesn't take anywhere close to that. So if you're just doing some network updates, it'll go much faster. Also in the general procedure settings, this is where you can define things like impedance and volume delay functions on your links and things like that. And then the final thing that I want to talk about in the calculation menu is the subnetwork generation. So if you're trying to pull out, this is the whole regional planning model, but if you are working on a project on just a subsection of this model, we could always use a subnetwork generator and cut out a subsection of it, and it will cordon off all those paths and create new zones and things like that on the boundaries, and you can still get all of that detailed information from that subnetwork that you need. In the graphics menu, this is where you can configure the visual settings. So we'll be talking a lot about graphic parameters. Different object types have different graphic parameters to view data more easily. We also have the ability to look at select link or flow bundle outputs. So you can, if you're putting in a bridge or you're taking out a bridge or you're removing or you're changing link cross sections or capacities, you can always select that link and see where all the trips that are running through that link are coming from and going to. Here's just a quick look at the graphic parameters menu, so you can see all the different object types that you can go through and edit the graphic parameters on. And then we have our assignment results down below. So again, select link in Visum is called a flow bundle, turn volumes, isochrones, shortest path search, sideline. In the network properties menu, this is where we provide background settings and settings that are not specified with specific network objects. In this one, the one I want to highlight here is in the network settings area. This is where you can pick out your left-hand versus right-hand traffic, your units. You can also bring in different coordinate systems. This one has a specific coordinate system assigned to it. I believe it's a state plane coordinate system. And then we also have different user-defined attributes. User-defined attributes are attributes that were not created by PTV Group. They're created by whoever built the model to store data or calculate data in various ways. Most commonly, what you're going to see in this is you're going to see a lot of UDAs that came in that are going to be similar to what were imported from the previous files. And so you'll be able to hopefully see fairly similar attributes that you might be used to with older files. And then farther down in this list, you can see different settings that are associated not with specific objects, but kind of higher class objects. For example, something like public transit operators, right? You'll put in public transit stops and put up public transit lines, but you might have a larger operator that controls things like fares and stuff like that. The next menu that we have is the demand menu. This is where you're going to be able to find all of the demand structure. So what kind of transportation systems and modes do you have in the network? For example, demand segments, right? We might have BRT, circulators, express buses, HOV, SOV, trucks, light rail, all those types of modes that the trips from zone to zone can pick between. And then we have different demand segments that group together those modes for assignment purposes. And then we have time series assigned to those demand segments. So the assignment as it goes through, it's assigning various weights on trips or different matrices based on time of day. Our scripts menu, this is where you have access to things like your Python console. You can run a script file directly if you don't want to put it into your procedure sequence. This is where you can import. So for example, when we were doing our model conversions, this is where we'd import from Cube. You also have access to your Python console, so you can go in and quickly throw in some custom scripts and things like that. And then as a trainer and tech support person here at PTV, this is my favorite menu. We have the help menu. You can go and access the online Visum help. We have the scripting comm help. We also have access to our various manuals, a link to our service pack downloads and our tech support, as well as example files for various specific. If you're looking to do something very specific, we probably have an example of it in that example files folder. So before I jump into scenario management, I just wanted to pop into Visum and just kind of lay out the various different types of panels and things that we have in the network itself. So up here are all the menus that I just went through up at the very top of the network. And then just down below that, we have, usually you'll have these three panels open by default. You'll have this network objects panel on the left. This has essentially all the different object layers. We have nodes, we have links, turns, zone connectors. The best way to think about this, if you're going through and building new infrastructure or something like that, is to kind of just, if you're not sure where to start, just start at the top and work your way down, right? You'll put in your junctions and then you'll link them together, access your turns, and then you'll add in zones. In this case, we already have all these objects in place within our network. On the right here, we can see our network editor. This is where you're going to physically interact with all of the objects in the network. To manipulate the network editor, it's all done on the scroll wheel of your mouse. So you can pan by pressing down the scroll wheel to create a little hand, and then you can just press and hold the scroll wheel to pan around. You can also zoom in and zoom out. Up above, we have some extra features for things like you can zoom to a specific section of the network using this little zoom box up at the top. You can also zoom out, and that will zoom and show the entire network. And so this is where you're going to be manipulating all of the objects within the network. If we look on the network objects layers over here, you can see that some of them are highlighted as white. If the little box is white, that means that it's just visible in the network editor. So for example, nodes currently are not visible, but links are visible. Similarly, we see that nodes is highlighted white and nothing else is highlighted white, which means that we are currently editing nodes. So as I hover over the network editor, wherever my cursor is, you can see that node number. If I select links, now I'm selecting various types of links in the network editor. So again, to manipulate the network editor, you just need to pick which layer you want to edit and which layers you want to be able to see. So I can turn on nodes, for example, or I can turn off nodes. Down below these network objects is the quick view. So if I select a specific node, for example, I have nodes select here and I left click on it, I can see some specific attributes about that node. Or if I click on a link, I can left click and select specific attributes about the node. So that's the basic mechanics of Visum in terms of network editing and manipulation. If you want to create a new object at the top of the network editor, there's a little plus button right here. We're not going to create any new objects right now, but we will be doing that in more detail tomorrow in session 2 when we talk about, we're going to do a physical network build. We're going to add some geometry. We're going to update some zones, land use updates, and then we're going to be putting in a new public transit line as well. So this is what the network editor looks like. The other menu you might see is if we go into the calculate menu, you might also see the procedure sequence. So if I click on the procedure sequence here you can see we have 249 various procedure steps. Most of these are going to be as part of the trip generation, trip distribution, and mode choice. They are all grouped together into various groups as seen by highlighted as yellow bars. So what we can do is we can find one of these groups and we can double click on it and see what's within those groups. So for example, this is a mode choice group. Down towards the bottom, you can see that in this procedure, we have 4 different time of day intervals that we are assigning. We have our AM assignment, And then we have our midday assignment, our PM assignment, and then our evening or off-peak night assignment. So these are our general assignment intervals that we're going to be looking at. But you can see that these sections here are fairly condensed. So if you're, again, just running a geometry update or something, you can just rerun the assignment there. These are tabbed on top of each other. So if we look down at the very bottom, you can see that it says network editor and procedure sequence. So I can click on these tabs to cycle between them. If you want to be able to see both side by side, though, all you have to do is find the tab that you want and then left click and drag, and you can detach that tab. And now I can put that tab, I can put this panel wherever I want. And if I grab and drag the panel, you can see how there's this interface right here. I can either stack it on top, or a lot of times people put it off to the side or on a different screen or something like that. And so that way you can have your procedure sequence or your listings on the side while still being able to see your network editor. Okay. The last thing I want to show you within the network, and then we'll get into the scenario management, are the listings. And so here we have the list menu. You can find the lists of various objects. So for example, if I wanted the list of all of my zones, I would go to lists, network, and then zones. This network will show all the lists of these objects that we have on the left here. So for example, I could open up my zones list. And if I put my zones list kind of stacked on the right over here, I can highlight a zone in this list and it will highlight it in my network editor. So these two windows are synced up, and I can edit the zones either from a geometry perspective on my network editor, or from an attribute perspective, and I can see all the various different types of attributes shown as columns here, and I can edit those. We can also access the list directly, so you don't have to, if you don't know where to find that list up here, you can also just access the list by right-clicking on the object that you want to find the list for, and then you'll see a list option. So for example, nodes, list, I can open up the nodes list, and then I can find the node in the list that I want to edit. And that's the basic mechanics of working through the Visum interface. Again, it has a paneled design, so you can organize the panels however you want. And then once you have the panels how you like them, you can always save this as a graphic parameters file.